Hello there. How are you? It's so good to see you. We'll sing and be happy. We're all here together again. Hi, friends. My name is Mrs. P. I'm a kindergarten teacher at College Park Elementary. I'm excited that you're here to finish out our week of learning. You've been doing a great job this whole week. We have been focusing on what animal this week? Whales. Very good. So today we're going to take what we've learned about whales, and we already did informational writing where we wrote facts about whales. But today we're going to take some fun stories about whales and write our own stories about whales, a make-believe story, okay? So let's get started with one of my favorite books. It's called Ibis, a true whale story. And I like this story because this story happened, it takes place in a place called Cape Cod where Mrs. P used to go when I was a little girl. So our story takes place in the ocean off the coast of a place called Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Have you ever heard of that before? Well, my grandmother and great-grandmother used to live there, and there was a boat there called the Whale Watcher, and you could go on the Whale Watcher and go out into the Cape Cod Bay and look for whales like humpback whales that look just like ibis, and I used to do that every summer when I was a little girl. So this is the story of a whale who grew up in the Cape Cod Bay and would swim around, and the people on the boats would see her, but then something not so good happens to her, and we're going to read about what happened. Ibis, a true whale story by John Himmelman. Ibis, a true whale story by John Himmelman. And this says, dedicated to the people of Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies and, of course, to Ibis. So that's who the author and illustrator, that's who they dedicate this book towards, or that's kind of who they made it for. Deep in a bay off the coast of an old fishing village lived a pod of humpback whales. Remember, a pod of whales is what you call a group or family of whales. One of the whales was a little calf named Ibis. Ibis was curious about everything in the ocean. What does it mean if you're curious about things? Yeah, it means you kind of like to see how things work, or you like to explore. There's a book character we read about, a little monkey who's very curious. Curious George. He usually ends up getting in a little bit of trouble. So one day, Ibis and her friend Blizzard went out swimming. They saw many kinds of fish. The most interesting were the starfish. Ibis liked to look at them. There was something about their shape that made her feel good. Do you like starfish too, like Ibis? I do. As Ibis and Blizzard were drifting over a reef, they heard a strange humming noise. The two calves looked up overhead to see something large and dark pass. It was as big as a whale, but it wasn't a whale. What is it? It's a boat, but they wouldn't know what a boat was, right? Because they're whales. They might have never seen one before. The calves were frightened. What does it mean if you're frightened? Frightened means scared. Show me what your face looks like if you're frightened. If you were a whale and you saw a boat for the first time. They had never seen a boat before, so they swam back to their mothers. The next day, Ibis went back to the reef. It wasn't long before another boat came along. Again, Ibis was scared, but she was curious too. So what do you think she's going to do? She's curious. She's probably going to go explore or check it out, right? She forced herself to swim to the surface. In the cool, hazy air, she saw several faces watching her. They didn't look scary. In fact, they looked very friendly. Ibis liked them. In the months that followed, Ibis and her friends lost their fear of boats. Boats came in many sizes and shapes, and the people in them always seemed to enjoy seeing the little whales. As Ibis grew, she learned more about the sea. She knew what kinds of sharks to avoid, what food was the tastiest, and best of all, where to find the most dazzling starfish. Ibis never got tired of looking at starfish. People and their boats became a part of her life. Whenever a boat passed by, she swam to the top to say hello. So friends, these boats that she's been saying hello to are small and they're nice, so it's okay that she's been saying hello to them. But why might it be dangerous for whales to swim next to boats? What do they have on them you think that might be dangerous around whales? Yeah, they might bump into the boat, they might bump into the motor, which can have a little sharp part on the back of it. And sometimes boats put out what behind them if they're going fishing? They might have fishing reels or nets with hooks, so that's why she has to be careful. So we'll see what happens. One evening, Ibis and Blizzard saw a school of fish swimming around the bottom of a ship. Ooh, maybe there was something good up there to eat. They went to find out. Suddenly, Ibis was caught in a fishing net. Now, these fishermen weren't trying to catch whales, they were trying to catch fish to eat, but sometimes whales or other animals get caught in the fish nets by accident. Suddenly, Ibis was caught in the fishing net. She fought to get free, but the more she struggled, the more tangled up she became. Finally, she broke loose, but part of the net was caught in her mouth and wrapped around her tail. So if it's wrapped around her mouth, then she can't do what? Eat. And if it's wrapped around her tail, she can't swim. This does not look good for Ibis. Blizzard swam off to find help. Ibis was confused and hurt. She wanted to get away, far from people and their boats and their nests. Slowly and painfully, she made her way towards the deep ocean. Many weeks passed, and Ibis grew very ill. The net in her mouth made it hard for her to eat, and every time she went to the surface for air, the net cut into her tail. But if she didn't get air every half an hour, she would die. Winter was coming, and it was time for the whales to move to the warmer waters to do their migration. But Ibis felt too weak to make the long journey. Instead, she turned back towards the coast. It was so hard for her to swim. She could barely keep moving. Ibis was about to give up. Then she saw a familiar shape. It was Blizzard. Blizzard saw that Ibis needed help. Gently, Blizzard pushed her to the surface so she could breathe. Suddenly, the water was filled with the sounds of boat engines. The whales saw two small rafts and a boat circling them. What a good whale friend he is, pushing his friend up to the surface so she could breathe without having to swim because it hurt her tail. Blizzard and Ibis tried to get away fast from the rafts, but Ibis wasn't quick enough. The boats rushed her before she could dive down. The people in the boats began to attach large floats to the pieces of the net that were hurting Ibis. Blizzard stayed nearby, circling the boats nervously. Because of the floats, Ibis could not dive. She began to panic, but she did not have the strength to fight. When the boats came in closer, a person reached into the water. Ibis stared at the person's hand. The hand reminded her of something she loved very much. What does it kind of look like? A starfish. She began to feel better. We can see she's kind of smiling now. Soon, many hands dipped into the water. Ibis felt them tugging at the lines of the net. Moment later, the lines fell away, and she was free. Ibis blew a big spout from her blowhole as if to say, "Thank you, thank you." And then she dived deep into the water. For the first time in many weeks, she felt no pain. She felt wonderful. Blizzard joined her. Then the two whales popped back to the surface for one more look. The people were waving their starfish-shaped hands. Ibis knew that those hands had helped her and that the people were still her friends. Soon, Blizzard and Ibis were leaping and diving with the other whales far away in the warm waters where they would spend the winter together. So that's the end of the story part, which was a good story. But I'm going to read you this part over here that says, afterward. Ibis is a real humpback whale. So this is from our author, John Himmelman. So he wrote us this letter in the book so we can know this. So Ibis is a real humpback whale. I first saw her one October morning in 1985 when my family and I were aboard a whale watching ship off the coast of Provincetown, Massachusetts. The whale swam right up to the boat as if to welcome us to her part of the world, and we soon learned Ibis's story from a marine scientist on board. He told us that only 1 year before, Ibis had been caught in the strands of a fisherman's gill net. The scientist who studied the whales in the area found her fighting to surface for air. Several hours later, when she didn't come up again, they thought she had drowned. But a couple days later, on Thanksgiving Day, a research boat from Provincetown Center set out to record some whale songs. A member of the crew spotted 2 whales swimming together. One of the whales was trapped in the net. It was Ibis. So friends, that Ibis being caught in the net and her friend helping her, that really did happen, which is really cool. The crew rescued her by attaching floats to her net that would keep her up so that she couldn't go down. In this way, they could keep her at the surface so they could reach into the water to free her. She was the first whale that was ever saved from entanglement. That means being all wrapped up in the net. Most are not so lucky. Countless whales have died after accidentally getting caught in gill nets. As I watched Ibis playing in the water around us, I could understand why those who knew her had fought so hard to save her. I got the idea to write and illustrate my own version of her story for this book. Because of the successful rescue of Ibis, the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies has added an entanglement fund to their program. So that means some of the scientists that work and live up in Cape Cod, they have special money and people who work that their job is to go out and try to find whales and help them get untangled from their nets if they get caught in a net. A portion of my profits from this book will go towards that fund. So if you buy this book, so when Mrs. P bought this book, some of the money that bought this book, it goes to help whales who get caught in nets. Thank you to Stormy Mayo, David Matilla, Carol Danton, Mark Gilmore, Mary Pratt, Sharon Pittman, and Charles Mayo Jr. for the precious life you saved. And thank you, Ibis, for bringing me a little closer to your world.